All right. Fulcrum of Truth, episode something.
13, I think.
13?
Yeah.
Okay. Um, we're going to just freestyle tonight, I think.
Yeah, I had something on my mind actually that I did
Okay.
want to bring up, but I don't
Perfect.
think. Yeah, in terms of where it goes, who knows. But to start with, I wanted to talk about anger essentially. Sometimes we're talking about science and physics and esoteric philosophy and stuff, but this one is more so, I think, something that's, near and dear to my heart due to things I dealt with throughout my life. You know.
Yeah, and we do talk about emotions a lot. I know that we've kind of centered a little more on scientific kind of principles, but emotion is a big thing between us, and I think that, yeah,
Yeah, I
that's
mean,
good.
well, from the basis of the fulcrum, right? The anger is the same as love, right? When you passions and these things, people understand this very, just to touch on that real quickly. I mean, I think it's clear for everybody that the more you care about a person, the more angry they can make them. You know what I mean? The more angry they can make you, the more love you have for a person, the more passion you have for them. They can usually get your emotions twisted up.
Oh man, that's crazy that you bring that up because I think I even said something to you. Maybe it might have been a month ago where I heard someone say that you can only hate a person as much as you love them.
Yes, yeah, that's in the first instruction that we're going to be putting out. Unless
Yeah.
that is that exact line, and it just shows how the truth of the fulcrum, right? That love and hate are just two equal and opposite emotions on the same spectrum of passion that you have for a
Yeah,
person.
but let's not get into hate because
No.
that's harsh. You mentioned anger.
Yeah.
Let's talk about anger.
Okay. So so this, yeah, rather than this being the esoteric philosophy stuff, this is more of like an actual effective therapeutic way to resolve anger issues that you might have.
Okay.
Right. And a lot of people in the world deal with anger. I mean, PTSD a lot of time manifests itself as anger, right? When a person gets triggered and the emotions get brought up from the past, it's usually a traumatic experience that was full of suffering and sadness and stuff. And this can a lot of time come with, unforgiven resentment that you have and anger and build up from the past that hasn't been resolved. And a lot of times when that past memory from PTSD gets triggered, it comes out as anger, and you unleash it on the people that are around you in a way that's disproportionate to whatever may have triggered you in the first place. You know.
Yeah, I think that's a common reaction, and you know me pretty well, right? I've had experiences with PTSD, and mine don't generally manifest themselves in anger.
Mm-hmm.
I'm more of a paranoia
Yeah.
person.
Yeah.
Um, and, I've told you, and I'll share with the community, like, I've lived where I have stared out my window so much that my blinds were broken
Mm-hmm.
because of paranoia. And that was PTSD. Um, So I think it can manifest in a lot of different ways. I think
Mm-hmm.
that anger is a very common
Yeah. Yeah.
release of that.
Yeah, and maybe so like for me, anger caused many social issues for me because I would say that with your paranoia, that's most kept to yourself. When you're in the closed
Hmm.
confinements of your house, you're dealing with it internally a lot of times. With the anger, it's like ruins your relationships because you're outbursting at people that you care about, or you're trying to be with coworkers and stuff and having these outbursts at them, and it's uncontrollable essentially, and it ruins friendships. It ruins
Maybe this has to
relationships.
be more about PTSD because I
Well,
think
this
we've
is.
both experienced it in different forms,
Mhm.
and it, all forms
Yeah,
tend to destroy those relationships, right?
yeah,
For
yeah,
me, it was like closing off, hiding, and being afraid of everything outside.
yeah, yeah,
Um, if for you, and if it's anger for you or
yeah,
something else for somebody else, it's, PTSD can just paralyze you.
yeah, yeah. And it's hard for me to speak on the paranoia aspect of the reaction to the
Yeah,
triggers,
sure.
right?
I mean,
Because
that maybe that wasn't
for
what
me,
you
yeah,
experienced.
it wasn't.
Yeah.
So I don't know if my solutions that I found for helping with the anger I dealt with so much help with the paranoia, because actually, you know, even though what I'm gonna,
I'll say I've felt paranoia out of you.
yeah,
Like,
I'd probably,
absolutely. But that might not be the primary.
yeah. Well, what happens for me actually is like the triggers are still there, where they've almost developed into more of a panic episode rather than anger. You know, because before that losing of control, where the chemicals kind of take over, the trauma takes over, where the chemicals begin to flood the brain, that stopped being anger, and I that's what I want to try and talk about here, is how to, when that trigger occurs and the chemicals take over and whatever's going on in the mind is about to, basically cause you to lose yourself, sort of, where you're, the way you're thinking and the way you're behaving is not immediately appropriate for what's going on in the moment, but so basically the understanding that I gave to it was that anger was a chemical, right? And this is where I have a hard time understanding it in parallel to paranoia, because I don't know if paranoia is a chemical the way that anger is.
See, that's the thing. I don't like that explanation of it being a chemical.
Oh, but it is.
Okay.
It absolutely
All right,
is.
go ahead.
Yeah.
Explain.
Yeah. So the frontal lobe in your mind, right, is basically a chemical factory that controls the emotions. Okay. This is what science says.
Let's stop here.
Okay.
This is what science says.
Yes, but
I don't like to apply our learnings and what we've, discovered and think that anything that science says is correct.
No, so it's not about it. So every time we test these things, they come true. Can I say it like that?
I'll say.
All
Okay,
right.
I'll go along with that.
So that's what I mean. So I'm not. This is based on on that understanding, on that theory.
Yeah.
Okay. So the frontal lobe is a chemical factory that controls the emotions. Okay, this is why the medicine that we're taking, the SSRIs, that are the selective serotonin reuptake inhibitors, right? This is attempting to control these frontal lobe chemicals that our mind produces, in an attempt to balance them out or to control them, so that we're not getting too sad or too happy or whatever it is that's causing us issues throughout the day. This is the This is the idea.
I don't like them.
Well, no, I'll
just say
don't
that.
like either. In my opinion, taking these type of medicines are like blindfold shooting at a dartboard. We don't know what we're doing. Okay. But they are affecting the emotional output of the human body.
Sure.
Okay.
Yeah, they do have obvious clinical, statistically proven effects.
Yeah, so they give these medicines targeting the frontal lobe chemicals, and it causes massive emotional reactions in a person's demeanor and personalities and stuff like that. So with that being said, the chemical factory that is the frontal lobe, okay, is kind of where a person that suffers from severe PTSD is suffering, right? Because the chemical and emotional reactions that we're supposed to be having to deal with everyday things that are issues, stressors and stuff like that every person has to deal with every day, they get reacted to in a way that is kind of reminiscent of the past traumas the person has been through for the past 10, 20 years, or whenever a severe trauma occurred to them.
Yeah.
That traumatic break in that frontal chemical system, right, that has lasting effects, leads into that, that misdosing of those chemicals, you could say, right? If a person, a guy cuts a person off on the road, right, and it's not really that big of a deal. There was no accident. Okay, they cut him off. You honk your horn at him a little bit or something like that. But if a person, that little amount of anger or emotional chemical release that happens in the frontal lobe to give you that little bit of anger, if it's disproportionately released and the valve is broken, which is the way I put it, like there's valves up there. If this valve is broken, and instead of it just releasing a little drip that you needed for this guy that cut you off, instead it wide open starts releasing a full chemical of anger and causes a person road rage. And this is where a person gets slightly cut off and their reaction is not necessarily proportionate to what had happened, but more so reminiscent of things they've been through in the past.
Okay. So what you're describing to me is very similar with what I experienced with paranoia.
Okay.
That it was magnified for some unknown reason.
Yeah. Yeah, where you might have had a little bit of suspicion or a little bit of like, a little bit not paranoia, but security, like checking yourself, like, oh, let me
Let
check
me
out the
ask you
window.
this, because this is something I experienced heavily. Even though the anger was magnified, did you know deep down that it was not appropriate? Because I knew always, almost always, that the paranoia I was feeling was inappropriate for the situation,
Yeah.
but I still felt it.
I don't know. I was slightly aware, but it wasn't vivid.
Okay.
It was like there would be moments of it
Yeah.
where it was like, what am I doing? I know I shouldn't be doing this. And
Okay.
then
Yeah, exactly.
immediately just have the emotion take over,
Yeah.
and or when you're angry, like you're writing a message or you're like writing an email or you're on the phone yelling or something and
Right.
and
It's not enough to stop you,
yeah.
but that feeling was always, almost always,
Yeah.
deep down inside me. Like, what am I doing?
Yeah, because it's not a natural thing, and that's the key words are it's a disproportionate reaction to an interaction that you have.
Perfect.
A stimulus. Causes you to have an emotional reaction. That emotional reaction is way out of line compared to what had happened, and this is like the clearest way to describe what happens when a person has PTSD. And I see now talking to you, we've never talked about this, but yeah, it does seem very parallel to your paranoia. It's a disproportional reaction to a stimulus. Oh, a car drove by. All right, I want to see who that car was. Nobody, and you go back to your couch. But with a person that has PTSD and that emotion gets amplified and that chemical gets shot through the roof, you're at the window staring all night long. You're wondering where the car went, all that type of
I
stuff.
think I've told you before, I've driven miles out of my way
Yeah.
because I thought someone was following me.
Yeah. So I'll go into though so this might work for that. You know what I mean? I'd be interested to see
same
how.
kind of thing.
Yeah. So if it is a chemical thing that goes on with the paranoia, as well as I know it's a chemical thing with the anger because of just how well what I did worked. Okay.
Yeah.
So essentially, also let me just say I went to multiple anger management classes where there were weeks of classing, right? And that's good for a very large group of people. Okay, like those anger management classes help. There's great strategies in there for people to have mild or average anger issues and stuff like that. But when you get into the extreme anger issues that come with 20 years and 30 years of trauma, of continuous trauma, of dysfunctional fighting in a household where you just had emotional outbursts and anger at a level 10 on a weekly basis for years and years and years, this is something that has almost gone beyond like a therapeutic thing, and now it's become a biological chemical thing that you're dealing with in your mind.
Are you willing to talk about that?
Well, yeah, I mean, yeah, exactly. So to give you an idea, I mean, that person that I talk of, that is, a level 10 of anger and going through dysfunctional fights with their family multiple times a week for years on end. That was me growing up. I grew up in a dysfunctional household where, for one, we fought like cats and dogs constantly at the top of our lungs, but then there, physical abuse occurred as well. And I can only imagine that, all of that trauma, it built into an anger. There was a rage inside of me. You know what I mean? There was this. It's like the unjust beating, the unjust abuse and all that kind of stuff just kind of builds up in you.
Mm-hmm.
And by the time I was 17 to 20 years old, I found myself transferring that type of abuse and that type of anger and dysfunction into my relationships with my partner, right?
Yeah.
And it's a vicious cycle, right? You end up taking what you learn from your parents and all that trauma and everything gets built up in you. You learn patterns of fighting and like coping skills that are bad, some drugs and alcohol, and ways to fight and like tactics in fighting that are abusive that you shouldn't do, but also like end fights or become a balance, you know what I mean, where one person is attacking the other person or one person is not attacking the other person and they're the victim every time. It becomes a balance in a dysfunctional household where there's usually an abuser and a person that's being abused, and unfortunately in most of my relationships it was both ways, and when it's both ways it's even worse because it's like it's hard to have sympathy for a person that's attacking you back as hard as you're attacking them.
Yeah.
And that can be a vicious cycle in a dysfunctional relationship in itself. you know.
Yeah.
But barring that, right, this is where these problems started. This is where the fuel and the fire begins, and this disproportionate reaction begins. When you get into your 20s and your early 20s, right? At this point, it's time to, in my opinion, realize and become self-aware and say, okay, I had this childhood, right? It's important for me to become self-aware of who I am as a person now in this world. And if I have flaws and I have things that are causing me issues with my relationships and with my career and my life, I need to start identifying them and begin to attack them kind of and beat them down and fix them, because you can't just live with all those issues that you grew up with for the rest of your life. It'll plague you forever,
Yeah. Man, that's hard for me to comment on. I had a really good childhood.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, right, I come from a split home, but most of us do, I think.
At this point, right?
Right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so, or at least half.
Mm-hmm.
But, my troubles were very isolated and specific, and I'm not ready to talk about them
No,
on
that's
camera.
fine. That's fine.
But I feel where you're coming from, and I do understand that disproportionate response.
Yeah. Yeah.
And how we deal with it. How did we get through it? I'm willing to talk about how I got through it.
Yeah.
If you're willing to talk about how you got through it, and we can share that with people.
This is what I want to explain specifically is the technique that I ended up having to develop to conquer the anger. Okay. Because it plagued me up until my mid 30s.
Yeah.
Okay. Where every month throughout my life up until my probably mid 30s, I had hit a level 10 anger, veins popping out at the neck, screaming, sweating, people telling me, you're going to have a heart attack. You need to calm down.
You did have a heart attack.
I did have a heart attack when I was 30. Yeah. And we can talk more about that another time, but, and from what we understand, it was from the stresses of growing up through that dysfunctional family and, arguing at that level and the stress it put on my body. Right. So I did have, especially after I had the heart attack, people yelling at me, you're going to have another heart attack,
Yeah.
And when I had that heart attack, it wasn't from yelling and everything, but it was brought on from the previous amount of stress, basically.
Right.
But the as far as anger issues, okay, and as far as ones stemming from PTSD in the past and not just from mental issues, I had the worst of the worst of the worst. Okay. Like when I reached my highest level of anger, let the world burn down. You know what I mean? It was nothing to stop me. God was the only one. You know what I mean? So,
and it's hard for me to relate to that because you've known me
a
pretty long time.
Yeah.
It's not self-control. I just do not experience the emotion of anger very often.
Yeah, that's so
That's
interesting.
not one that pops up for me.
Yeah.
It's occasionally.
Yeah.
And I told you before, I was like, people have actually challenged me on the fact that aren't you mad at me?
Yeah.
And I'm like, no, I don't get angry. I do on occasion.
Yeah.
But it's one of the things that kind of and I'm weird. I'm a weird person. I understand that.
Mm-hmm.
And so are you, frankly.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
But anger is not something that ever really popped up as a major thing for me.
Yeah.
And this is where I say, I can understand how that could manifest itself. And I think for me, it just manifests itself in paranoia instead.
Yeah.
And it was just extreme, over the top.
Yeah.
Man, scared of everything.
Now, I'll say this, right? My anger, right? The reason that my anger got out of control and the reason that this is the whole gist of what it comes to, right? Is that the anger is something that was conditioned for me.
Oh, well, yeah. Okay. If that's the example, then I can understand.
Yeah. So
how that
it was all right, here's, your brain's going to go to a 10 as and angry as it can be, and we're going to do it this week, and then we're going to do it again next week, and then we're going to do it again next week, and then next month we're going to do it again, and then another month, and then next month, and then next month, and next month, and eventually your brain's like, oh, this is normal. This is what we do, and it's going to make it a lot easier to do it. Hey, we're going to go back to attendance. All right, we're going. Okay, no reason to stop it. We do this, and due to the habitual nature of our minds and our actions, that type of trauma in the past and that type of conditioning throughout your life in dysfunctional family and just being angry and having those fights conditions your brain to be ready for that activity, and that's where it becomes a problem big time, because you don't want that to be the activity, right? Even though your brain is like, oh, this is smooth sailing, this is what we're supposed to do, this is how we do it all the time, you want it to have a proportionate reaction, right? We don't want to go to a 10, but once you're conditioned to that, and once your brain is in the habit of that, I call it basically that your valves are broken. You know what I mean? You don't have control of your valves anymore. They don't know how to put out the appropriate amount of anger or happiness or sadness or whatever you're dealing with in that situation emotionally from the trauma that you might have had in the past. And it's just flooding your emotions with too much of one or too much of another.
Yeah, and maybe I need to do a little more self-reflection on why when I go to a 10, it's lock myself in a room and don't trust or listen to anything anybody says.
Yeah, what happened?
Worry about what's happening around, like just watch.
Yeah.
If I see an animal outside, I'm panicked.
Yeah.
Yeah, maybe I need to do a little more self-reflection, but I feel like I've come past it. I don't really, I mean, I experience it on occasion, but it's not level 10. I don't.
Well, this will maybe explains why you might be doing better now. So once that conditioning occurs, right? Once this is the state that so many people that are dealing with PTSD from like family dysfunction and stuff like that, they have so much anger and rage inside of them. You know what I mean? A family member and the history with a family member, one interaction with them can bring up all the past anger and all the past fights that they had, and just unleashes these chemicals, and you can't just get into a slight argument with this family member anymore. It just turns into like a, you know what I mean, I want to rip their head off. Yeah, immediately, because your brain just dumps out all the memories that you had in the past with this guy, right? So the whole key to fixing this is clearly reprogramming and reconditioning, right? So for me, when I was in the process of my divorce, when I was going through some of the worst times these past few years, right, when I was learning, hey, this isn't, the way you've been living your life isn't going to work anymore, essentially, right? I was getting angry multiple times a week, veins popping out of my neck, freaking out, and I knew I wanted to stop it. I didn't want to be like this anymore. I didn't want to go angry like that anymore. And immediately what came to mind was when drug addicts are trying to quit using drugs. And I said, all right, well, what's a drug addict do? A drug addict puts a calendar on the wall, and they start crossing off days, and they take it a day at a time, right? Rather than taking it a month or a year and say, okay, I'm quitting or anything like that. They just start taking it a day at a time. And after one day of not using drugs, they put a mark on the wall. And then after 2 days, they put another mark on the calendar. And after a week, they put a whole week worth of marks up there. And after a month, all of a sudden, they got a month clean. And it's like, all right, I did this day by day, gradually. It wasn't as much stress. It wasn't as much pressure. You know what I mean? And it was a system to kind of do it.
But the other thing I'll say is it's a choice.
Sure.
You have to choose.
But watch this.
That you want something different. And
yeah.
And this is where I'm going, where I'm saying like, how we reach this point of getting past it.
Yeah.
You really have to decide.
Well,
for yourself.
But watch, it's a lot harder.
I know it's a lot harder than
a lot harder to decide I'm going to get better right now, right?
Oh,
so a person, so you can't. So this is the whole thing about the day by day thing, right?
It's the humbling yourself.
No, it's the easiness of the day. Okay, it's easy to quit smoking or quit doing drugs for a day or 12 hours. Okay, it's hard to say I'm going to quit for 30 days. It's hard to tell somebody I'm going to conquer my anger right now. Okay, no, you're just going to try and get through one day. That's it, because that's an easy task. And in that easy task, you're actually doing a large task, which is starting the first step on the journey to fixing the conditioning in your mind. Right. So when you're, 2 days is easier than the first day. The third day is easier than the second day. The seventh day is easier than the third day. The 10th day is easier than the 7th. The 30th is easier than the 10th, right? And they keep getting easier and easier and easier. And even if, and the whole trick is when you do mess up, right? This is what I did with mine. It took me 3 or 4 times of resetting, right? When you do mess up, like, I'm 15 or 16 days into not getting angry. Okay. One of the things I didn't explain is this, right? I put my emotions on a scale of 1 to 10. Okay. A 1 is the saddest, most, I want to commit suicide. I hate the world. That's your depression state. A 10 is the vein popping out of your neck. You're screaming at people. You're so raging. You know what I mean? Your head's going to blow off. You want to kill everybody, basically, right? The 5 is where you want to stay. That's your neutral zone, right? 4, 5, and 6 is where you stay throughout the day. You can get a little bit sad, drop you down to a 4, natural sadness. You know what I mean? Like somebody tells you something bad where you can't go to work one day because there's no work, or your girlfriend breaks up with you or something like this. You go down to a 4, you're sad. Somebody makes you angry. You know what I mean? Somebody pisses you off, or somebody tries to start a fight with you at the bar or something like that. You might go up to a 6, but you never go above a 6 and you never go below a 4. And if you can maintain that 4 to 6 range throughout that 24 hours, that's when you check off that day. And now by doing that day by day throughout a month, throughout 2 months, throughout 3 months, you actually fix the valves in your brain, okay? And after about 90 days, you get into an argument with somebody when your anger would normally have just shot straight to a 10 in your brain saying, hey, this is normally how I work. And all of a sudden it says, no, we don't want to go up there. This isn't normal. This is for the past 90 days, we've been hanging out at 4, 5, and 6, and we like it here. So your brain will actually try to fight back to that neutral position, and all of a sudden the brain that was jumping out of control and wanting to go there will actually pull you back and try and save you.
Sorry, I'm not laughing at you. I just had a flashback to us yelling at each other on the factory floor in front of everybody. And we got a lot of good stuff done, but I mean, it was probably not the best display.
No, I still think that was good stuff, but
it was effective.
Yes,
I mean, we trained a lot of people not to
talk back.
Don't question us.
Yes. but no, in the end, what I'm describing to you is the only way that I was able to, after years and years of trying to conquer my anger, I had to develop my own understanding of reprogramming the mind's valves and releasing the right amount of chemicals again.
Yeah.
That was the only way possible.
Yeah, that's good, man. And I agree. I mean, you've come worlds from, where I first knew you.
Yeah.
And I can see it. I see the transformation. I see where, when I reflect back to those early days on the manufacturing floor and we're yelling at each other and I'm like, why is this guy yelling at me? And I can see that was, at the time, I didn't see it as an issue.
Mm-hmm.
I like being challenged.
Yeah.
I like that.
Yeah.
I challenge people all the time. It's one of the things, the paranoia is another thing that makes me somewhat unapproachable as a person, and makes me a little bit weird because I'm always very skeptical of every person that I meet. And it's nothing, it's not personal. It's not about you. You have to get to know me before you can understand that.
And you could say, right, because we didn't just become good. Like normally all my good friends, best friends, it's like you meet somebody and you hit it off right away and you become best friends.
Yeah.
But that wasn't how it was for us. Like
no.
It took years.
I didn't even want to hire you.
Wow. Really? I never knew that.
I was forced to hire you.
Are you serious?
Yes.
Oh, wow. I didn't know that. I did not know that. I didn't know that.
I did not want to hire you. I was like, I don't like this guy. Something's wrong about him.
Oh, wow.
But it worked out.
Yeah.
It worked out.
I didn't know that. That's the first time I ever heard that.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, I didn't know that. But it took, years. It was years of us getting to know each other. You know what I mean? And it was just little things that I think we saw about each other over time that were like in common. And it was a slowly gradual coming together. You know what I mean? But definitely not like any other friendship I've had before. That's for sure.
Yeah. And so that, reflecting back, I can see the anger as a problem. In the moment, I viewed it as a challenge, and I like a challenge.
Yeah, yeah,
Um, I like when people challenge my thoughts, and you did it regularly.
yeah. Well, we
And so I was like, okay,
we've
all
said
right,
this
this
many
guy.
times, right? It's when we never argued to see who was right. We always argued to see what was right. We were always
Exactly.
trying to find the best solution. It was
Yeah.
never about who was right. And this is missing from, this. We can probably do a whole discussion on this, but, that's where I think, even though my passion was risen so high while we were debating and stuff like that, and yours was too, even you were standing your ground on everything you were saying, but it was always, the goal was never some ego driven, I'm right or you're right, or I want all the technicians to know that I'm right in this situation. No, it was just like, we want to do the best job that we can here, and that was it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, it really was.
Yeah. But the anger was out of place. Like you said, it was, it should never get to that level. And when it was getting to that level, it wasn't just what we were doing there that was causing me to be that angry. You know what I mean?
Right, exactly. And it's the same thing. It's so parallel. And I know that you don't understand the paranoia aspect of it, but what
Same
you're
thing.
describing is so similar to my outlet
Yeah. Yeah.
that I experienced, where it was just literally lock myself in my room and stare out my window because I'm worried that somebody's coming.
Yeah.
And I don't even know what they're coming for.
Let me ask you this. Do you think that, so like I said, the conditioning is what really cured the anger issues for me the best way. Do you think that given so much time without a paranoia trigger and having that overload of paranoia, day by day, okay, I had a day where I didn't get really paranoid, another day where I didn't get really paranoid, that it could have conditioned you to help you not be, get out of control like that too much?
I got to be honest. I think it was a big mix of things. I do think medication helped me.
Okay. Yeah.
Um, I was formally institutionalized for a period. And talking to the right people, and then just honestly, I just let go. I let go of everything. And I don't know how to describe that. We've talked about like ego death and things like that, but ultimately I just let go. And that was the real big turning point. And I don't know, maybe if that was a point you reached at somewhere in there.
I had to. That had to happen for me to start my journey of recovery. Like, for me to realize I needed to do something about the anger, I needed to let go, or at least to get to the, like, when I let go was maybe when I realized, okay, I have an anger issue that needs to be dealt with, like, in some type of way. Like, I have to do something about this because it's plaguing me. And I don't think maybe I wasn't ready to let go of the anger until I let go of everything, you know what I mean? And just kind of let go of trying to control anything at all.
Right. Exactly. And that's a good point. It's like when I let go of trying to control anything in my life and just living my life day by day, which is kind of what you explained.
Yeah.
This is my day. This is whatever comes.
Yeah.
That's where it got a lot better. And I don't know about you. I still do struggle with paranoia. It's at like, I'm at like the 5. I'm not at the 10.
Yeah. No, that's really good.
Mine, on a daily basis, sometimes I hit the 5, sometimes I hit the 6.
Yeah.
But I don't hit the 10 anymore because when I start to elevate, I just let God do it. Let God take control. Where is my path? Where am I going?
Yeah.
I don't need to worry about that.
Yeah, and that's, our projects have helped me with that, right?
Yeah.
Because kind of God has given us this projects to working on, and we're working on, and anytime now, I talked to my ex-girlfriend about this, how, like, I think that I was getting panic attacks. Now the PTSD is manifesting as panic attacks rather than just anger, which is like 100 times better. You know what I mean? Like,
hard to say that.
It's hard to say that, but that's because, you know.
But at least a panic attack isn't going to end you in jail.
Exactly. I mean,
right?
A panic attack you can deal with. You know, it's more of an internal thing, right? I can like, I don't care if I'm having a panic attack. Like, I just don't want to be screaming at people or hurting people that I love and shit. You know what I mean? So, but it's weird. It's like the body is still dealing with the PTSD in a terrible way. I mean, the panic attacks are debilitating, to say the least. I mean, it's like 4 or 5 hour ordeal sometimes, you know. But rather than it coming on as uncontrolled rage and anger, this trigger of my PTSD, now it comes on as like, oh man, you know, basically panic. The body, you know, you panic because before, and this is going a little deep into me, but I'll talk about it, right? Before, that entire wave and ride of the trigger of the PTSD would be filled with rage and anger. Mm-hmm. Now the trigger and the wave is still there, but the body just doesn't really know how to feel. It doesn't know what to do. It like panics because it knows, man, every time this happened before, it was terrible. You know what I mean? It was absolutely terrible. And yeah, you're not getting angry right now, but what's going to happen? You know, I think that I could get scared or something because you don't, like, you're always fearful that anger is going to come back out or something like that. You know what I mean? You're in this uncontrollable state, I think, and that's what maybe where the panic comes in. You know?
Yeah, I want to touch on something before we wrap up. You know, a shout out and it's something we've talked about as a motivation for this channel in the past, but we haven't really done anything. I think and actually, I know, and you know, I don't like saying I know anything. But I believe that there are a lot of veterans dealing with these kind of issues. And, you know, I just want to send out love to them and let them know, and anybody feeling these kind of issues, but, you know, veterans in particular, you know, it really hits home with me that, you know, there's a path to get better. Yeah. There's a path to change these things. And you just need to really, I can't give instructions. This is the problem. This is the problem with it. I can't give instructions. Yeah,
but I can say quickly, right, you know, on this topic of homeless veterans or veterans dealing with mental health issues or dealing with societal issues because of the, you know, the way things are in our systems, you know, in this country and all over the world even, right? Just shower them with love.
Yeah.
That's it, right? It's so easy. It's so easy to do it, and it just takes a genuine act of kindness, right? I mean, I think most people feel it when they see somebody that's struggling. They have this quick knee-jerk reaction to do something or say something, but then, you know, their inhibitions take over because of the way the world is today and security, and they want to be safe and all that, so they don't necessarily open up. But just that act of kindness, that's gonna go more. You know?
Yeah, exactly. It's hard when you see that. It's hard to know what to do. Mm-hmm. But honestly, just give them a hug.
Yep. Tell them you love them.
Yeah.
Yep.
That's all it takes.
Ask them if they need anything.
Yeah. What do you need?
Yep. And it's just that's what it's about. They might not need anything except for that hug or that love. You know what I mean? So it goes a long way. And I tell people this too, right? It don't cost anything. So that's the benefit of telling people you love them or give them a hug or anything like that. Something that don't cost nothing, you can give it out infinite times. Why would you not give it out? You know? Now, Matt, we'll end the Fulcrum of Truth for tonight.
Yeah, man. Good discussion. I really like that.
Yeah, I think so. I think everybody will like it too.
All right.
All right.
Like, subscribe, comment.
And we'll see you next time.
I love you, brother.
Love you too, bro. Peace.